Now, the executive director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, Suleiman Ibrahima, has described government official one in the Airbus bribery scandal as former President John Dramani Mahama. Speaking on the Super Morning Show on Joy FM a while ago, Mr. Ibrahima said the only high-level elected government official who fits the description in the court ruling is Mr. Mahama.
Talk about the extent to which sometimes contracts are inflated. And even as we know the figures are quite huge, we end up going with those same figures. And at the end of the day, it's the country that loses. I think that our arms are not twisted when we are signing contracts that, you check prices and you realize that these prices are obviously inflated. But having said that, I think in this whole conversation, what is of interest to me is the question about who is that government official one. And I think that there are three things. One, the documents say that this person, apart from being a high government official, is an elected official. Then it gives a timeline between 2009 and 2015. And then, of course, the bit about being a key decision maker when it comes to procurement or acquiring equipment for our military. So if you look at these three issues, then you want to do the analysis in terms of trying to see who possibly could be government official one. And my analysis is that, look, talking about procurement of military hardware or military equipment, you can talk about maybe possibly 3 or 4 people that you would say could possibly be described as being influential in terms of the decision making. And I look at number one, the Commander-in-Chief of the Ghana Armed Forces, that is the President. Number 2 would be the Vice President, who by our Constitution would also be the Chairman of the Ghana Armed Forces Council. And then you can talk about the Defense Minister, who is in charge of our defense setup. And then maybe possibly you can talk about the CDS. But when you put these together, then you go to the second leg of it. So that is to talk about who has influence in terms of being a key decision maker. And these are the 4 people that come to mind. Then the next question is a bit about being an elected official. So you want to look at all these 4 people and find out who amongst them could be described as an elected official. And you look at the period between 2009 and 2015. In 2009, Mills's first defense minister, so if we take the defense ministers, Mills's first defense minister was retired Lieutenant General Henry Smith. And he was not even an MP, for one to even say that, okay, because he was an MP, you could describe him as an elected official. So that technically knocks off the first defense minister under Mills. After Mills, after Henry Smith came... I think it was Ben Kumbo. Yes, Ben Kumbo was an MP at that time. So you may say, okay, he was an elected government official. But in looking at him as Minister for Defense, he got that position not by election but by appointment. And therefore, in terms of he being a Minister for Defense, you certainly cannot describe him as, an elected official. Plus, we have to remember, Ben Kumbo did not start as defense minister in 2009. So if the conversation started in 2009, then it couldn't have been Ben Kumbo.
Right.
Then during the period, we also had Honorable Makoyongo, who became an MP only after the 2012 election. So again, if you even say that Oyongo was an elected MP and therefore one could say, could describe him as an elected official, he only got there as an elected official, elected MP and Minister for Defense after 2012. So certainly he couldn't have been there in 2009. So that takes off the defense ministers as the possible culprits in this instance. So when we take them out, then we are technically left with the Commander-in-Chief and then the Vice President, both of whom would rightly be described as elected officials, because the president is certainly elected.
But is the vice president elected?
And the vice president is elected. If you look at Article 60, Clause 4 of our Constitution, it says that a person shall be deemed to be duly elected an emphasis on elected as vice president. If the person who so designated him to run as his running mate or vice president is duly elected as president in accordance with the provisions of Article 1, I think it's Article 163 of the Constitution.
Okay.
So the Constitution says that the vice president is elected. And so there is no question about that at all. And therefore the president and the vice president will be the ones remaining. Now, in terms of mills, if, as in the documents we've all seen, the transaction went on all the way till 2015, and it said this elected government official was in power or in government as of 2015. And we know that President Mills passed on in 2012. So certainly that then could not be reference to President Mills. And therefore, the conclusion that I draw is that if you do these analysis, and I don't know anyone else who could be described as an elected government official and at the same time be a key decision maker when it comes to acquiring aircraft for our military. And remember, as I said, the vice president then is an elected government official, and of course he's a high-level elected government official. 2, by our constitution, he chairs the Council of the Armed Forces, and therefore, in terms of making decisions, certainly he's very key, because the part of the job of the council is to make recommendations to the president in terms of decisions and procurements and so on and so forth in terms of our military. And so for me, my conclusion is that I would say, well, if you do all the analysis, it settles on former vice president and later president Mahama as the possible person that is referred to as government official 1. Right. But of course, he is still alive, fortunately, and we wish him well and long life. I think it will be proper and great if we can hear from him, if it is something that he knows, and certainly even if he is not government official 1, as referred to in the document, I think that he certainly would be privy to the decision making in terms of the acquisition of those aircraft.
Meanwhile, anti-corruption crusader and former executive director of the Ghana Integrity Initiative, Vitus Azim, wants all to refrain from speculating who the government officials named in the documents are. He wants President Akufo-Addo to treat all cases of alleged corruption and bribery equal.
What struck me was a reminder of our scores on the CPI. Sometimes when these scores come out, we come out to say, oh, it's just mere perception. It doesn't reflect what's actually happening on the ground. But then when these things come up, then it confirms the scores that Transparency International comes out with for the CPI. And you know, procurement is a very lucrative area because there are huge amounts of money involved. So even if one asks for 1%, it is a lot of money. And so that is the thing, the worrying part of this thing that is in the news. And it's not the first time that this is coming out. I think you remember there was the sale of Vodafone some time ago, also involving maybe
Johnson.
Maybe and Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And so these things keep happening. And so when they happen, they don't worry you. They don't surprise you. But what you hope is that some action will be taken to curb such things in the future, which sometimes does not happen.
But in this case, the president has asked the Office of Special Prosecutor to immediately begin looking into this. Good news?
Well, it's good news that the president has acted so promptly, as we have been calling for him to act in similar cases involving his own officials. But it's interesting. Friday came out, and Sunday there was this instruction to the Office of Special Prosecutor. It is good news. Let's hope that the Special Prosecutor would take up the challenge and come out with findings that will help us to identify the people involved, find out whether there's any loss to the state, and whether such a loss, if there's this, can be recovered, and all that.
You said it sounds interesting that the president immediately referred this to the Office of Special Prosecutor. Are you suggesting then that in other cases of corruption, he could have acted as swiftly?
Yes, I think that's what we normally expect of him. as the president that has promised to curb corruption. So every other thing, if he does that, it will be very nice.
Which other cases of corruption do you feel that he didn't act as quickly as he should?
Oh, but a lot of them people have to put pressure on him before he comes out, and even when the report comes out, it is not made public, and all that. You and I, these are things that are in the public domain. Let's say the Australia visa saga, let's say the Boss case, the Ghana maritime case. It takes some time before he decides that an investigation should be conducted. So it's not a new thing.
Some have suggested that he probably acted swiftly this time because it involves an administration that is not his. He's a former government officials in the Mahama administration.
Yes, I think that's what I was also implying, that if it was his own official, maybe he wouldn't have acted so promptly. And that in future he should try to act so promptly in all other cases, whether it is involving his own officials or other officials. The important thing is to try to deal with corruption. And so one thing that discourages corruption is prompt investigations into allegations of corruption and actions on those that are found culpable. And it should apply to everybody, whether you are NDC, NPP, or CPP, or PNC. And that will show that he's really determined to deal with corruption.
Let's talk about Mr. Martin Amidu, who is now tasked with getting to the bottom of this matter. Some other persons in the anti-corruption space have said that because of his lack of resources, which he himself has complained about in the past, it may take too long for us to get to the bottom of this.
Yes, I agree with that, especially the fact that there are some cases that are before him and we are not hearing anything about them. And investigations like this, they don't take just one day. It may even involve traveling outside the country to consult his colleagues in the UK. And so if he doesn't have the resources, definitely it will cripple him. And then I heard somebody also saying that Parliament should investigate. These are just duplication of efforts and waste of resources. If this president has already instructed somebody to investigate, a state institution to investigate, there will be no need for another institution to go.
Well, NDC MP for North Tongue and ranking member on the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament, Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa, wants the issues to be considered in a broader perspective, holding multinationals accountable, for instance, for shady deals they conduct in other countries.
Billion euros. Mm-hmm. And the judge in the case says that even if you add all the fines paid in 2018 in England and Wales, it comes nowhere near this figure. And it's the highest ever fine paid. It tells you that fundamentally there was something wrong within the corporate entity Airbus SE. And I think that we should focus discussion on the conduct of multinationals, how they set up slush funds to influence decisions, to induce, to scout for personalities who could win them favors, who could open doors that they do not deserve, who could give them an advantage. Remember that if you go to the background of this case, Boeing had raised concerns about the practices of their competitor Airbus SE. And you notice that the conduct of Airbus SE was very consistent in all the countries they had operated. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the UK SFO was not the only entity looking at Airbus SE.
No, it wasn't.
In 5 countries. That's Ghana, Taiwan, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, and Ghana, Taiwan, Malaysia, the Sri Lanka, and a few other countries. The Americans looked at their conduct in other countries. France also looked at their business operations in other countries, including Colombia, China, and what have you. You notice that it is Airbus that are the perpetrators. And you see, because we are in an election year, and how desperate sometimes political actors want to take political advantage and throw mud at each other, I am saying that, look, let's for once go beyond just this MPP NDC bashing. And not because I think that the NDC has anything to hide. I've already told you that we do not have anything to hide. We welcome this investigation. We know that we'll be vindicated at the end of the day.
Okay.
But let us focus attention on the conduct of these multinationals and begin to put in place measures that will make us stronger, more immune from these very, very, very damaging schemes of these multinationals. And you see, what also worries me, Daniel, is that all of these fines, the 3.6 billion euros, you notice that France, United States of America, and Britain have shared it. It's been paid into the consolidated fund.
Okudzeto Ablakwa speaking on the Super Morning Show on Joy FM this morning.